Sometimes it feels like you're just juggling chainsaws trying to get all your different apps and services talking nicely, right?
Absolutely. It's the reality now, isn't it? Everything's interconnected.
Yeah, and building, managing APIs,
hmm
it can get messy,
Yeah,
fast, risky even.
for sure. You've got your main app, maybe mobile stuff, partner integrations. They all need a solid, secure way to connect.
Hmm.
And that's really where something like Amazon API Gateway comes in. It's like the air traffic control for your API requests.
Good analogy. It handles the underlying infrastructure, right? The tough stuff.
Exactly. So you can actually focus on building the features, not reinventing the wheel for API management.
Which brings us to the book we're digging into today, Mastering Amazon API Gateway. It calls that stuff the undifferentiated heavy lifting.
Yeah, I like that phrase. And this book, it's really aimed at anyone who's serious about building, well, resilient systems on AWS.
So who are we talking about specifically?
We're talking DevOps engineers,
Hmm.
the ones deep in deployments,
Yeah.
back-end engineers building the actual logic.
Anyone who's had that late night call because an API just gave up.
Exactly. Been there.
Yeah.
It's for people thinking beyond just code, focusing on like solid architecture, people who build things to last.
Right. So in this deep dive, we're going to pull out the key stuff from Mastering Amazon API Gateway, really help you level up your API game.
Yeah, we'll look at who the book's really for, the core tech it covers.
Like REST versus HTTP APIs, security, observability.
hmm And some real-world examples where API Gateway just shines.
Okay, so let's dive deeper into that target audience first. You mentioned developers, architects, dreamers.
Yeah. Well, anyone aiming for those robust systems.
Yeah.
It definitely connects with people who felt the pain of tricky deployments. The book offers practical architectural answers, not just, theory.
So beyond just titles like DevOps or backend engineer, what kind of problems is this person facing? Who should really pick this up?
Well, think about the engineer who's just tired of building the same security layer or rate limiting or monitoring setup for every single API.
Reinventing the wheel.
Exactly. Or the architect trying to create a consistent API strategy across maybe dozens of microservices.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And definitely the DevOps person who needs to keep it all running smoothly, make sure it's observable. If you've ever spent hours debugging weird connection issues
Mm,
or trying to properly secure an endpoint, yeah, this book gets you.
makes total sense. Okay, so they get the book. What are the first big concepts they're going to encounter?
Right. So the book really grounds you in a fundamental choice first. REST APIs versus HTTP APIs.
The two main flavors in API Gateway.
Yeah, REST APIs. The book calls them the OG option, which is pretty accurate. They're the mature, really feature-packed choice. Super customizable.
So good for complex stuff, like CR at APIs.
Perfect for that. Especially when you need really fine-grained control over the request, the response, how data gets mapped.
What kind of features are we talking about with REST?
Oh, lots. The book goes into request response mapping with VTL, that's Velocity Template Language, for transforming data on the fly. Different ways to connect to your backend, like Lambda proxy for serverless, AWS integration for other services, even basic HTTP proxies or mock endpoints for testing.
So very flexible integrations.
Very. Plus all the core API building blocks, resources, methods, models for defining data structures, deployment stages for managing releases, custom
And
domains.
operational stuff too, like limits.
Definitely. Rate limits, quotas, usage plans for different tiers of users, caching for performance, and a whole suite of security options, IAM, Cognito, Lambda authorizers.
Wow, okay. That's comprehensive. So that's REST. Then there's HTTP APIs, the newer ones.
Yep, the new hotness, as the book puts it. These are designed to be lightweight, fast, and significantly cheaper.
Cheaper is always interesting. How much cheaper?
The book mentions up to 70% cheaper than REST APIs, which is,
Yeah,
yeah, big deal for a lot of projects.
70%. Okay. So what makes them cheaper and what are they best for?
They're simply less overhead architecturally, great for just straightforward proxying to Lambda or other HTTP backends. Think modal apps, single-page web apps.
Right, where you need speed and low cost. What else do they offer?
Lower latency is a key advantage, so faster responses. They have core support built in, which is nice for web apps.
Ah, yeah, course can be a pain sometimes.
Tell me about it.
Mm.
And they simplify authentication using JWT or OIDC.
Hmm.
Often you don't even need custom authorizer code for that.
Sounds pretty appealing for many use cases, but there have to be trade-offs, right? What do you lose compared to REST?
Absolutely, there are trade-offs. HTTP APIs don't have all the bells and whistles yet. Things like usage plans and API keys for, say, monetization. not built in.
Ah, okay. So less suited for public tiered APIs, maybe.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, data transformation options are more limited, and there's no automatic SDK generation like you get with REST APIs.
So how do you choose? The book helps with that.
It does. It lays out a pretty clear decision process. Think about how complex is your API? How sensitive are you to cost,
Right.
latency needs? Do you need those advanced features like usage plans or deep AWS integrations?
So the takeaway is
Generally, REST for the complex, mature APIs needing lots of features and control. HTTP for faster, cheaper, often simpler integrations, especially Lambda proxies.
okay, clear distinction. Now let's talk security. Huge topic for APIs. What's the approach in the book?
Security is definitely a major focus.
Mm.
The book really pushes a layered approach, not just one silver bullet.
That makes sense. Defense in depth.
Exactly. It covers using IAM, AWS's identity and access management,
Mm.
or controlling which AWS resources can hit your API.
Right, for internal stuff or machine to machine.
Mm-hmm. And then for user-facing apps, web or mobile, it details integrating with Cognito user pools,
Mm.
handles all the user sign-up, sign-in, token management.
Okay, standard user auth. What about custom logic? Maybe validating a specific token type or checking permissions in a database?
Yeah, for that, the book dives into Lambda authorizers. These let you write your own custom auth logic in Lambda function. Total flexibility there.
So you can basically implement any auth scheme you want.
Pretty much. And for HTTP API specifically, it also covers JWT authorizers, a built-in, high-performance way to validate those JSON web tokens directly.
Faster than a Lambda call, I imagine.
Generally, yes. And then it also touches on things like resource policies for broad access control and AWS Wave, the web application firewall, for protecting against common attacks right at the edge.
So a whole toolkit for securing things. Good. What about after deployment? Keeping things running, observability.
Crucial, right? You can't fix what you can't see. The book really stresses how important visibility is for uptime, for debugging.
Or sanity.
Yeah, for sanity too.
Yeah.
It covers API gateways, built-in integration with CloudWatch metrics like latency, error counts, 5xx errors, plus detailed execution logs.
Standard CloudWatch stuff. Good.
Yep. And it highlights AWS X-Ray for distributed tracing. So you can follow a single request as it goes through API gateway, maybe hits a Lambda, talks to DynamoDB, pinpoint bottlenecks.
Ah, X-Ray is super useful for microservices.
Definitely. And the book also makes a good point about using structured logging. Makes your logs way easier to search and analyze later.
Right, JSON logs instead of just random strings. Okay, that all sounds essential. Can we make it more concrete? What are some real-world examples from the book where API gateway really makes a difference?
Sure. The book gives a few good ones. Think of a startup with a mobile app, probably using serverless on the back end.
Common scenario.
Right. API Gateway gives them that single, secure front door for the app. Makes it way easier if they need to onboard, say, a partner API later. It can even help integrate with older, maybe legacy systems without needing a huge rewrite immediately.
That's huge for startup focus, speed, central control. What about a bigger company, maybe a SaaS provider?
Good example. If you're offering public APIs, maybe charging for them. API Gateway has built-in stuff for metering usage, setting throttling limits per customer.
Ah, the usage plans and API keys you mentioned with REST APIs.
Yeah.
Exactly. Crucial for monetization and just protecting your backend. It can integrate with developer portals too, making life easier for your API consumers. Shows it's not just for internal stuff.
Handles the business side of APIs too,
Nice.
and complex architectures, microservices.
Yeah, that's a classic use case. You've got maybe tens or hundreds of backend services. API Gateway acts as that unified entry point. The facade.
Right. Hides the complexity.
Totally. Provides a consistent, secure, scalable way in without clients needing to know about all the individual services behind it.
And the book touches on other API types too.
Briefly, yeah, it mentions WebSocket APIs, also part of API Gateway for real-time things like live dashboards, chat applications, shows the breadth of what the service can do.
Cool. So it really sounds like mastering Amazon API Gateway is aiming to be that go-to practical guide.
That's exactly the goal, yeah. It's not just
Yeah.
listing features. It's about helping you think like an API architect on AWS, understanding the trade-offs,
Balancing cost, performance,
Yeah.
features, right? Making smart choices to build something that works now and can evolve. Future-proofing, kind of.
So wrapping up, if you're out there listening, maybe you're that DevOps engineer, that backend dev, that architect wrestling with APIs on AWS.
And you want to really get a handle on API Gateway, move beyond the basics.
Understand REST versus HTTP, nail down security, get visibility, build resilient systems. This book sounds like the resource.
It really is. It covers the ground comprehensively.
So where can people find Mastering Amazon API Gateway?
It's available online, Amazon obviously, and other places, and in major technical bookstores. If you're serious about APIs on AWS, definitely check it out. It'll give you the knowledge and the practical guidance you need.
Awesome. A solid recommendation to level up those API skills.